we can always upload it later. I am delighted today for this edition of Conversation Starters to be joined by Ellen Bravo, who is a leader in the field of advocacy for women in the workplace and really, I think in some ways invented the idea of work-life balance and what it means to be a working woman. And all of the challenges that seemingly, and I know in the movie 9 to 5, I watched it about a year ago and I was like, geez, those things are still going on. And that was really the crucible of what you were coming up against in the early 80s and you're still working towards today. So I'm so excited to have Ellen with me today for this conversation starter. As always, I'm Ellie Gettinger, Education Director at Jewish Museum Milwaukee. And I am, and these conversation starters are designed to give us a sense of what's going on in the community and to really explore these ideas and to have a way of looking at some of the complex issues that people are facing during pandemic or hopefully after pandemic, and taking time to really explore those ideas in total. So Ellen, thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thanks so much.
So can you kind of describe the evolution of this universe that I think in the last, I would even say 5 years, in both of these last two campaigns, there's been much more attention paid to the challenges of working women and the idea of what daycare and sick leave and all of these big questions, but this is not new. So can you give us the kind of movement and how you've been involved and engaged in this movement?
Sure. So, for me, I had 2 babies without any paid leave. And Gloria Steinem once said, we used to not have the words battered woman or sexual harassment. We just called it life. So I think for a lot of us, you just thought, well, that's life. You figure it out on your own. And for me, it meant going back way too soon and hurting my back. And I remember when I was pregnant with my first child, this is late 70s, I got a letter from a friend in France who said, I feel so sorry for you that you have to have this baby in the United States. And I thought, wow, I thought I was pretty savvy. I'd been around the block a couple of times. I was already an activist. I had no idea that the rest of the world was so far ahead of us or that we were so far behind and that it really could be completely different. And then my husband and I moved to Milwaukee in 81. His mother had died and we wanted to be closer to his dad who lived in Janesville. And one of us had to get a job with health insurance. So I type 100 words a minute. I said, I'll get a job at the phone company. And the woman who hired me said, you can't be sick for 5 years. And she said, she actually used these words, you're probably wondering, how the hell am I going to do that? And I remember being surprised because she was quite prim and proper. And she said, well, you just have to, because we're a public service utility and we need you here every day. And I had these 2 little kids. And the rule was, if you knew in advance that you had to schedule a doctor's appointment that could only be done during working hours, you could make up the time. But if you called in and didn't tell them in advance, like if your rude child woke up with an ear infection and didn't tell you in advance.
How dare that child have an ear infection? Probably from daycare, which you have to send them to because, yeah.
So, it became really clear to me what I'd known for a long time, which is how much women's work is undervalued, that what women do in the workplace when it comes to care is paid so little money because it's done for free in the home and is invisible and was originally done by women who were enslaved and immigrant women for nothing or for peanuts. And that until we revalued care, we would never reach gender or racial justice. And that we really had to, if we really want equality in relationships that are women and men, we can't get equality in the home until women are equal outside the home, and men, many of whom want to be good fathers, sons, and husbands, stop being punished for it at work. So we started, I found 9 to 5. This was one of the issues they cared about. We started working in Wisconsin for a Family Medical Leave Act And we won it because kids helped win it in 1988, because at the time the governor was Tommy Thompson, and there had been a bill passed. He said, I won't sign it. Give me another one that's only for maternity leave and only for 30 days. And we knew it had to be gender neutral. And it's not just babies who need care. It's kids, at 4 and 6 and 8, but also partners and parents and ourselves. So we wanted to establish that principle of family and medical leave. And we brought these kids to make the case, and they did, and they won everyone over. It was pitifully meager what we won. And we all knew it. We knew, first of all, that it was far too little time. And secondly, that it was unpaid. We got in a provision that said if you had any paid time that you'd accrued, vacation or other sick time, you could use it for the purpose of this act. But, having a baby is a joy. It's not a vacation. And people get sick all the time. You need that time. You can't really bank it for the cancer or stroke or whatever, God forbid.
Right. I know when I had my babies, now there is actually paid maternity leave at the Milwaukee Jewish Federation, which is delightful. But before, both of mine were before that happened. And I came out of maternity leave with 0 vacation days. And that first earache was like, I don't know what I'm going to do, and luckily I worked for a workplace that was, oh yeah, that's okay, don't worry about it. But I think a lot of women in the world don't have that luxury. And
well, let's start with a lot of women in the United States, because the truth is every other country except one is better than us in this regard. The other one is Papua New Guinea. That's where we rank last. And, here's the thing. Here's a number to remember. Nearly 1 in 4 women who give birth, who are employed, go back to work within 2 weeks. I mean, that's a scandal. It's shocking. It should not be allowed. It's the kind of thing where people should get together like they are around the vaccine and say, stop, we have to figure this out. It can't work. Here's the good news. We did figure it out, and we know what it looks like, and we've won it. So our movement won paid leave and family and medical leave in California. That was the first place in 2002. It took 6 years to get the second state. That was Rhode Island. And that was New Jersey.
The most populous to the least populous.
New Jersey was the second. Rhode Island was the third.
I was like, whoa, that's the spectrum there.
2002 to 2013, we just won these 3. And then we tripled that in the next few years. There are now 10 states that have won. And there's now, as you know, candidates for office of all political stripes talk about paid leave. It's wildly popular across all voting blocks, all demographics, all political points of view. And, part of the argument we are making is it's good policy and it's also good politics. And it's not a favor to women. It's a better way to do business. It's a better way to strengthen families. And it's a better way to build an economy.
When you are looking at these kinds of policies, do you still have this sense of keeping gender neutral language? Is that is this, or do you feel like paternity leave is that's the next step after?
No, there's no question about, all we're fighting for is gender neutral, universal. There's no, it's the good news is we have won. The movement has really built a model and built momentum for that model. Each state that won improved the model. So now the most recent ones, they have these factors. It's 12 weeks paid family and medical leave for men and women and same-sex couples. They understand that no matter where you work or who you love or what kind of job you do, you should be eligible. And they understand they've added some things. So they've lengthened the amount of time. The first one that won it was just 6 weeks. They understood that if it isn't enough income that you get while you're out, you're not going to be able to take it or take it for the time you need. And if you don't have a job to come back to, chances are you're not going to take it either. And so we know there's reams of evidence. That's great. And we also know that, like, for example, tomorrow we're having an awards ceremony. I invite everyone who watches this. It's called the Game Changer Awards. So just go to familyvaluesatwork.org, familyvaluesatwork.org, and there's no cost, you can sign up. And
we'll put the link in the comments after this.
One of the people we're honoring, the business champion. So there's a worker activist, a community partner, business champion, a labor champion, and a policy champion, is Good Business Colorado. That's the most recent win, was in Colorado. And they were really instrumental in lining up hundreds of businesses to support it. She said, it's weird to get an award for something that's so good for us. We did this because it's the only way we can afford to do it for our staff, most small businesses. And we want it for our staff, but we also want it for our community. Because the truth is, when people don't have paid leave, if they're out of money or out of a job, they don't spend. And that hurts small businesses. So this argument got made that, oh, this is about workers versus business. And lots of business groups are part of our coalitions, and they say baloney, that it's about how we value families, but also how we strengthen our own workforce and our community, and therefore our bottom line.
How we have employees who actually have the ability to come to work in any kind of mental capacity. I mean, any of us who've had a baby know that 2 weeks after you have a baby, you do not have the wherewithal to go and do any kind of job, aside from maybe holding a baby and nursing a baby and feeding a baby.
Well, there's a documentary called 0 Weeks that I hope is still on Amazon Prime for people who have that. It's a really powerful, and if not, contact me and I'll help you figure out how to get a copy. It's a powerful documentary, and it follows 6 people who needed leave and didn't have any, for all the variety of reasons people need it. And one of them is a woman, for her, who has cancer. For her, chemo is what you do on your lunch hour. There are millions of people in the United States in that situation. There are people who skip treatment because they would lose their job if they did. How is that?
Thereby losing their medical coverage.
Exactly. And back in 1988, one of the kids who testified at the state legislature and helped win Wisconsin FMLA was a kid who'd had cancer when he was 5. He was now 9 at the time we did it. And he talked about, both his parents were with him every time he had to he described this needle as being, this giant thing. And he said, one would hold me and one would tell me a story. And there's no way I could do it if they weren't both there. And he said, the kid in the next bed didn't have parents there during the day. They would come at night, only one at a time. And he didn't know why when he was 5, but he did know now that they would have lost their jobs or their insurance if they had been with him. And he said, I don't remember much about that kid. But I do remember this. He loved the Supremes, and he always used to sing the song, Stop in the Name of Love. And I thought, what a great slogan for our movement. Stop in the name of love. Doesn't make any sense. And the good news is, one of the things, we have a graphic on our website about the intended consequences of paid leave. Because everything we say we care about, reducing infant mortality, maternal mortality, racial disparities, getting people to get vaccinated, breastfeeding, getting people to follow doctors' orders and get the treatment that they need, and so many more things are the intended results of this. And it, in fact, are exactly what happens. Let's talk a little bit about, go ahead.
Oh, no, you go.
No, say what you're going to say. It's fine.
I was just going to say, in terms of kind of where we're at right now, what do you see this next, and we are in this very politically divided universe, but this is a bipartisan issue. This is an issue where we should be able to see some national movement. Do you have confidence in the kind of transition in administration to maybe make this a national mandate, or do you think it needs to stay state by state by state?
No, absolutely. We've always intended the state wins to pave the way for a national win. It shouldn't depend on where you live or who you work for, whether you can be there in the best of times and the worst of times for the people you love. But I have tremendous confidence in our movement. I have tremendous confidence in the commitment of this new administration to I mean, the new president is a person, Joe Biden has lived this. He lived it when he lost his wife and child and his other kids were in the hospital. He lived it when his grown son had cancer. When New York passed paid leave, Cuomo, it was Joe Biden that he invited to come because they wanted to show this wasn't just about babies. Cuomo, the governor of Cuomo had a partner who had breast cancer, and he brought in Joe Biden, who had lost a child, and made it really clear that paid family medical leave is about family in all its aspects. So we're really confident about that. We have one with bipartisan support in several of the states. And it's because there were Republicans. Two things happened. One is, as one guy told me privately once, a Republican state legislator, he said, I may not be a genius, but I can read a poll when I know what 80% support means. But the other thing was we made the case and he understood. He understood that it wasn't just about babies, which is what his original proposal was. He understood that you had to include everybody. And he began to understand that there was a lobbyist from the hospitality industry that he convinced to come to the table. He said to the guy, come to the table not because you have to, although you do have to, because these people are going to win, but because you want to, because this is going to transform your industry. You have so much turnover, this is what will change it. That's what convinced him, is how this affects jobs and job retention.
Well, that's here your intended consequences, exactly. The things that are actually like, hey, this is better for you.
Exactly. At our Game Changer Awards tomorrow, we have the world premiere of a song called Paid Leave for All that actually my son and his partner wrote, and I mean, they're performing. And one of the lines in it is paid leave saves jobs, paid leave saves lives. And, you know, it really does. But here we are in the pandemic. So all of a sudden, one of the things about this issue is for a lot of people, they don't think about it till they need it. And that's when they find out they don't have it. And then they're scrambling to figure out what to do. So on top of the stress of the illness that you're dealing with, or just the franticness of a new baby, you're suddenly also scrambling to figure out how you're going to pay your bills. Well, that happened on a national level. Everybody suddenly had to think about, what will I do if I get sick, or if I'm quarantined or whatever. So,
or what do I do if I have to take care of my kids at the same time while I'm trying to work?
Exactly right. That's exactly right. So the good news is our movement helped create a national law for the first time that includes paid sick days and paid family leave, the Families First Coronavirus Relief Act. And it was great. And we know there's evidence now of how much a difference it made. Literally, that bill, and then the fact we've won sick time in dozens of places, that cut the incidence of coronavirus 56%, where people had access to it. So we have the numbers and we know it helps. Here's the problem. That FFCRA law left out up to 106 million workers. It left out healthcare workers. It left out emergency responders. The corporate lobbyists lobbied so that it cuts out people who work in a company of 500 or more. So the people who deliver your FedEx package or your Amazon package, they're not covered by it. The people who work in Walmart, they're not covered by it because the company's too big. As if they would take care of it on their own. Well, ask the meat packers, ask TSA. I just learned that 9 TSA workers in the Denver airport have died so far from coronavirus. How is it we let this happen, And of course, it isn't we who let this happen. It's a government who let this happen, but it's shameful and it's got to change. So we're fighting hard. That law is set to sunset at the end of this month. We need it to be extended and we need it to be expanded so that it will cover everyone. And also, it does have 2 weeks of paid sick time and then up to 12 weeks of emergency paid leave. But the emergency paid leave is just for parents whose kids' care center or school is closed because of the pandemic. people, as we now know, there are many people who get coronavirus who are sick longer than 2 weeks or who need to care for someone for longer than 2 weeks. What are they doing? It's just a disaster. Hard enough to have this illness and be what they're calling long haulers if you don't have paid time. So we're working hard on the coronavirus relief front, and people who want to join us, go to our website and you can plug in and we'll help you speak up, because unfortunately one of our senators is one of the people who doesn't realize, who's helped have the Senate do nothing to take up bills that the House has passed to change this. But also,
this is in that place where a bill has been passed that you're comfortable with in the House, and now we're just waiting on the Senate to take action. And so there's
the House passed a great bill. It went nowhere in the Senate. But the other thing is, I mean, there's emergency conversations going on right now, and there's hopefully will be something that comes out. But people need to hear right now, in the bill that's been proposed, this bipartisan bill, has no inclusion of paid leave. That's got to change. So extend and expand this bill that exists. But we also want
on your website, there's language for people who are interested in making phone calls or writing postcards. Yeah. Wonderful. So check out Family Values at Work. The @ is an @ symbol. I'll put the website in our comments so you can see that, but make sure you're checking that out. It gives you, one of the things we love at a conversation starter is something that you can take action with if you want.
And here's the thing, what we're hoping is to lay the basis for permanent programs, because, you know, babies and cancer didn't go away during the pandemic, and nothing's changed about that, except in the states where we've, you know, already implemented these programs. So we hope people will join in, because it's literally our voices that have made this change, building really broad and diverse coalitions of, you know, people in disability justice, people who care about racial equality, LGBTQ rights, but also the healthcare professionals. There are lots of them who are parts of our coalition, and business owners, and, you know, women's groups and so on. And thinking lots of
yeah. In thinking about the pandemic specifically, one of the things that I've noted is how much research has been done about women and productivity and the workforce. In particular, like I know I saw a study actually this was probably in June, it was early in the pandemic, that the number of women in academia publishing had dropped precipitously, that I saw another article that this is like an extinction level event for women in the C-suite, all sorts of, you know, those. Is there anything that you've been seeing, or anything kind of from a community support that has been buttressing women who are really struggling with this challenge of taking on many of the responsibilities at home? And this isn't universal, of course there are, but I think in the vast majority of families, home education or those kind of family responsibilities are falling on women versus professional engagement, advancement, and all of those other things that
it's been a disaster. Nicole Mason at the Institute for Women's Policy Research called it a she session. Obviously it's hurting men too, but it's had a devastating effect on women, particularly women of color. It's just knocking people out of the workforce, and it's going to take a long time to get that back. That hurts all of us. I mean, I remember this was, 5 years ago, I think, when Tom Perez was Secretary of Labor, there was a study done that showed our economy, when you compare it to Canada, and there's a graphic about this on 0 Weeks in the movie and on their website. We used to be on the same track in terms of women's participation in the workforce, and then they got way ahead of us on paid leave. And because of that, we lost $500 billion in the gross domestic product. In fact, most of the gains economists are showing that families have made because wages have been stagnant, most of the gains in the last decades have been because of women either joining the workforce or increasing their hours. So when that changes, it's a big setback for women, for families, but really for all of us. And the only way to fix it is, to invest in the economy, invest in childcare, which has been demolished, and create programs of paid leave so that men can share in caregiving, so that same-sex partners can be there for each other in sickness as in health, and so that all of us can be there for the ones we love and also be responsible employees as we want to do.
It is both a heartening, I think that there are all of these positives on one hand, and it is challenging on the other. So it's like, but I so appreciate your perspective and the work that you've done in trying to create a more level playing field. And hopefully someday in the future, we'll have this conversation, be able to talk about all of that equity and across racial lines, across gender lines, across, for same-sex couples. And it'll be an amazing moment when we get to that point that we can be like, you remember that time we had this conversation?
And you know what? I'm going to make one last plug for people to see the Game Changers Award, because I want you to meet the women who are responsible for this change. Meet some of the activists who have just from their own lives, from the pain of their own lives, have discovered that they also have power if they act together and are helping drive this change. That's what's really exciting. Cause for hope.
Well, I want to thank you, Ellen, for sharing your wisdom and insight with us. I also just want to thank our sponsors for this program, that Howard and Barbara Schnall sponsored this conversation starter. It is the end of or the beginning of our Giving Tuesday week. So if you want to go to jewishmuseummilwaukee.org and make a donation, we never hate that. So thank you all so much.
Good work. Have such wonderful displays and programs.
Yep.
So that
and thank you again for joining us for this conversation starter. And we'll see you again.
Thank you so much. Take good care.